Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today, I'm going to be talking about the fourth album from Air, Pocket Symphony. I think Air's track record up to this point have been pretty dang solid. Moon Safari and Talkie-Walkie are near untouchable. 10,000 Hertz Legend is the underlooked classic. Virgin Suicides is one of the best received film soundtracks of the 21st century. This album, perhaps unfortunately, is the spot where I think Air started to lose people. While I will have to admit it is most likely my least favorite main Air album to date, there are a good handful of problems I have with it, but that's not to say it's a bad album by any stretch. I mean, it's pretty much no longer particularly electronic by this point. But screw it, this is an Air retrospective and I know this album well enough to talk about it in depth. Well, my biggest problem with Pocket Symphony is that it is not consistent. There are some great songs, there are some good songs, there are some meh songs. Not to mention it felt like they kind of tried to make a consistent mood with this one, trying to make it much more introspective and subdued than usual. But there are some songs that don't actually fit that mood and feel kind of out of place. It's kind of all over the map and not really in the good way, but I still hold the good moments on this album make it worth checking out. I guess I'll go down track by track. It starts with Space Maker. This song is mainly based around a woodblock rhythm. And sets the tone for the album. It's fairly typical as far as Air songs go, but it was definitely one of the standouts here, with premier Symptome-style bass lines, warm acoustic guitars, and melancholy electronic pads, mysterious piano, subtle orchestral sounds, and an overall very mysterious but emotional atmosphere, kinda like a more intense version of Casanova 70 or something. Once Upon a Time, the first single from the album, is one of my favorite Air singles of all time, and probably my favorite track on the whole album. It's got waves of pianos, flutes, and fast-paced drums, bells, and fairy tale themed lyrics. It's just such an amazing track. It feels like time is literally speeding up while listening to it, and making this beautiful sound in the process. Time's getting on. Time's over now. It's a full minute longer than Space Maker, and not to discredit that song, which is also excellent, but Once Upon a Time feels like a full minute shorter. It's just so easy for me to get engulfed in. But after such a high like that, there's really nowhere to go but down, and I'm not particularly enthusiastic about the next track, One Hell of a Party. I'm fairly certain this song is supposed to be the musical equivalent of a hangover. Like, that's not me insulting it, it's literally about a hangover. Jarvis Cocker says, "The morning after's killing me and I have to rest my head." Now, I've never actually experienced a hangover. Big surprise. So I don't exactly find this relatable, but I do believe the lyrics match the music. After the whirlwind high of Once Upon a Time, this song is in fact like waking up feeling sick and in a daze. The emotion is definitely there, and Jarvis Cocker's vocals make for nice variety, but I don't know. It's such a huge drop in mood from the previous track. I get why they did it. It's not a bad song out of context, but it's not exactly the most fun to listen to, and I'm usually not really in the mood to listen to both one after the other. Next is Napalm Love, where the mood changes up yet again, and this time it's a lot pissier and confrontational. There's a ton of unearthly electronic effects, punchy pianos, synth harpsichords, etc. This song is almost too intense to fit the album, but there are less fitting songs on here, and I'll get to that. It's enjoyable enough, though. A bit more fitting is Mayfair song, which is kind of like another piano-centric Premier Symptome-style track. More laid-back than Space Maker, but also warmer than most of the Premier Symptome songs thanks to its heavy focus on pianos. Definitely one of the more enjoyable songs, though. There's pianos, like, on every song on Pocket Symphony. But anyway, it leads directly into Left Bank. Another one of the weaker songs. It's basically an acoustic guitar ballad about being lonely, nothing particularly special. It's just catchy and pleasant enough for me to not skip it, but it's not very interesting, and it's in no way a standout. Photograph, on the other hand, is much more memorable. Now this is probably the closest we get to a song that actually sounds like it could fit on Premier Symptomes. There's basically two different modes to the song. The instrumental verse sections, which sound more emotionally ambiguous, and Premier Symptomes-like, with cool bass lines and strings and sometimes these pretty awesome echoing bell noises. And the chorus sections with lyrics about being so famous God wants your autograph. Okay. And some warm acoustic guitars and bells that tie it towards the overall melancholy and warm mood that the rest of the album is going for. I don't think it stood out to me on first listen, but it's definitely one of the standouts now. Has been for quite a while. But then suddenly we get Merdu Japon, which sticks out like a sore thumb from the rest of the album. The mood is completely different. It's extremely upbeat and happy, and very unambiguously so. Not to mention super intense and driving and comes from out of nowhere, so it's like the mood whiplash from Once Upon a Time to One Hell of a Party, but in reverse. That being said, while the album would be much more cohesive without Merdu Japon, I'd be lying if I said I didn't actually like the song. To be honest, I absolutely loved it on first listen, and out of context, it's an excellent track. Great mood booster, uniquely, submarine kind of pop song. This song is basically the sexy boy of this album, albeit a much better song out of context, but with even worse placement. Sexy Boy I can see working better if it didn't come directly after La Femme d'Argent, but I can't really think of any place on Pocket Symphony to put Merdu Japon without negatively affecting the full album experience in some way. The best place I could think of, I suppose, could be between Space Maker and Once Upon a Time, but even there it'd probably just make One Hell of a Party even more gutting than it already is. They should have just waited to put it on the next album, Love 2, in my opinion, and it would have worked great there, but oh well. We got what we got. And at least it's a great song out of context, I'd be unlikely to skip it despite the bad placement. I think I get angrier with this transition when I'm talking about it than when I'm actually listening to it. So take that as you will. Anyway, the mood comes right back down, as if Merdu Japon never even happened, leading into Lost Message. A sad and minimalistic piano-centric piece inspired heavily by Eric Satie, with really only the typical Moon Safari-esque synth washes to accompany it. This used to be by far my least favorite track as a kid, probably because it came after Merdu Japon and it is complete opposite mood-wise. But again, keeping in mind how out of place Merdu Japon is, I think Lost Message works a lot better now than it did for me then. It does definitely do its job well and recaptures that atmosphere that was so rudely interrupted. And thankfully, the mood here is kept constant throughout the rest of the album. We next get to the brilliantly dreamy Somewhere Between Waking and Sleeping. I used to think this song was just okay as a kid. At least it was a step up from Lost Message, I thought. But oh man, now I think this song is amazing. Neil Hannon's voice works well against the acoustic guitar and orchestra, and it's just a really blissful and emotional track. Maybe this should have been after Merdu Japon and eased the transition, but I've ranted enough about that. But that's a very nice song with an excellent atmosphere. Next is Redhead Girl, and this is another one of the weaker tracks. It has a neat and mysterious atmosphere not too far removed from, say, the beginning of Alone in Kyoto. Although, Jean-Benoit Dunkel's voice kind of bugs me here a little bit. He has that kind of upper range to his voice that makes him kind of sound like a girl. Well, he uses that range here, and it's not a very good fit here, if I'm gonna be totally honest. It's like maybe he's trying to give the song a touch of lesbian, like a woman talking about how the course of time stands still when the redhead girl goes by, which would be interesting if it weren't for the fact that it doesn't actually really work, because I know Jean-Benoit Dunkel is not a woman. I suppose he just uses uprange because it sounded better against the instrumental, but Yeah, not a bad song, though. It's got a nice atmosphere, if nothing else, and the instrumental with all the wind chimes in it is fairly interesting. Nitesite is the ending, and it's the most minimalistic song of them all, mainly based around 2 repeating patterns of 4 notes played on the Rhodes electric piano, with some strings added in for texture later on. It's a very tranquil and peaceful song, not really sad or even that emotional, but it works for that kind of isolated atmosphere. I questioned this ending as a kid, but it's grown on me quite a bit since then. I think it works rather nicely as a closer. So, overall, I obviously have a lot of problems with this album, most notably that the track order isn't as well thought out as it could be. While it begins and ends well, there are too many questionable transitions that could have possibly been better had the track order been different, and there were a handful of different songs that didn't really do much for me, but I think the good on this album outweighs the bad. The good songs are still very good, and the overall atmosphere, Murder Japon notwithstanding, is fairly easy to get immersed in. It's definitely not their best work, but it's still worth checking out at some point. I'm overall feeling a 7.5 out of 10. Favorite tracks: Space Maker, Once Upon a Time, Mayfair Song, Photograph, Murder Japon, Somewhere Between Waking and Sleeping, Nitesite. Least favorite track, I've juggled around a couple. It's either One Hell of a Party, Left Bank, or Redhead Girl, depending on my mood. Right now, it's probably One Hell of a Party. But, of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.